All right, ready to dive into this one? We're tackling a classic today, Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah, this book is like the holy grail for a lot of entrepreneurs, isn't it?
It's interesting, though, it was written way back in the 1930s, and people are still going crazy for it. Why do you think that is?
You know, everyone wants that secret formula, right? That magic recipe for wealth and success. But I think Hill was onto something when he talked about the principles behind success. It's not about copying someone else's moves. It's about understanding the core drivers.
Yeah, I like that. So, less about a quick fix, more about building a solid foundation.
Exactly.
One of the first things that really jumps out in the book is his emphasis on burning desire. Can you talk a bit about what Hill meant by that?
Yeah, it's not enough to just, kind of want something.
Yeah.
Hill was talking about a whole different level of desire, an obsession almost, the kind that pushes you forward even when things get tough.
He tells that story about Edwin Barnes, right? The guy who was so determined to work with Thomas Edison that he basically hopped a freight train to go knock on his door.
Right. Now that's burning desire in action. Barnes was so focused on his goal that he burned every other bridge, leaving himself no choice but to succeed. He made it happen.
And it's not like Edison was just handing out jobs to anyone who showed up, right? The guy was a genius. He must have seen something special in Barnes.
Absolutely. And I think that's a crucial point. It's not just about wanting it badly enough. It's about that desire shaping your actions, guiding your decisions.
So you're saying our desire can actually influence the opportunities that come our way.
That's exactly what Hill suggests. And honestly, there's a lot of research now that backs up the power of intention. When we focus our energy and emotions on a goal, we become more attuned to the possibilities around us, things we might have missed otherwise.
That's pretty powerful stuff. But I can also see how that level of focus could be, I don't know, a little intimidating for some people. Like, are we all supposed to quit our jobs and risk it all on a dream?
And that's where Hill's next principle comes in, definiteness of purpose.
Definiteness of purpose. Okay. So it's not enough to just have that burning desire. We have to define exactly where we're directing it.
Right, like think about it this way. You can have the fastest car in the world, but if you don't know where you're going, does it even matter?
Okay, I can see that. So how does Hill illustrate this point?
Well, he talks about the Great Chicago Fire. Remember, tons of merchants, they just saw their livelihoods go up in smoke.
Right, devastating. Total devastation.
Yeah, and many of them just gave up, left the city. But then there's Marshall Field.
Didn't he end up creating one of the biggest department stores ever?
Exactly. But the key is, he didn't just say, oh, I hope to rebuild someday. He stood there in the ashes and declared, I am going to build the world's greatest store on this very spot, and it's going to be incredible no matter how many times it burns down.
Wow, what a statement.
Right. And that's the power of definiteness of purpose. Field had a clear vision, a precise goal. He didn't just want a successful business. He had the entire picture in his mind, the location, the grandeur, everything.
Okay, so we've got this burning desire, a crystal clear vision of what we want. What's next?
Well, this is where Hill introduces a concept that often throws people off a little.
Let me guess. It's a little out there.
You could say that. He talks about the importance of faith.
Faith, like religious faith.
Not exactly. He's talking about something much more practical. It's about having this unwavering belief in yourself, in your ability to achieve your purpose, even before you see any tangible proof that is possible.
So more like unshakable confidence.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that Hill actually backs this up with, well, personal experience. He tells this really moving story about his son who was born deaf.
I think I remember reading about this.
Yeah, so Hill refused to accept that his son would never hear. He clung to this absolute belief that somehow his son would be able to hear.
And was he?
He was. Hill believed it so strongly that he essentially willed it into being. And what's really cool is that modern science is starting to understand the mechanisms behind this kind of thing. It's the power of the subconscious mind.
Okay, so how does that tie into faith?
Well, our subconscious minds, they don't really distinguish between what we vividly imagine and what's actually real. So when we consistently, and I mean consistently, focus our minds on the outcome we want with that unwavering faith that it will happen, we're essentially programming our subconscious to make it happen.
So we're essentially planting those seeds in our minds, nurturing them with faith, and then letting our subconscious do the work of making them grow.
Exactly. And Hill actually had a term for this process, autosuggestion. He literally talked to himself, visualize his goals as already accomplished.
Didn't he also have that thing where he'd imagine himself having meetings with, like, historical figures?
He did. He called it his cabinet of advisors. He'd picture himself in a room with people like Abraham Lincoln, Emerson, even Darwin. And he'd have these in-depth conversations with them, asking for advice, seeking their guidance on his projects.
So he was basically creating his own personal mastermind group, even if it was all in his head.
Exactly. And the thing is, it worked for him. It just goes to show the power of our minds to influence our realities.
Okay, so we've got burning desire, definiteness of purpose, faith, and now this idea of autosuggestion. What else did Hill say we need in our arsenal? You know, it's funny you mentioned surrounding yourself with those brilliant minds because one of Hill's other principles is specialized knowledge. But he also makes it clear that you don't necessarily need a fancy degree to be successful.
Yeah, he actually uses Edison and Ford as examples, right?
Yeah.
Neither of those guys were exactly scholars in the traditional sense.
Exactly. So what's the takeaway there?
It's about being hungry for knowledge, constantly seeking out the information you need to excel in your chosen field. Whether it's reading books, finding mentors, taking courses, or even just diving in and learning through experience.
So it's less about where you get the knowledge and more about that active pursuit of it. Always be learning, always be growing.
Exactly. He tells this great story about a woman who was determined to help her son land his dream job.
What'd she do? Pull some strings.
Nope. She decided to arm her son with knowledge. She researched the company he wanted to work for, like inside and out, their competitors, industry trends, everything. Then she compiled all this information into a detailed plan.
So instead of just handing him a resume, she handed him a roadmap to success.
Precisely. And guess what? It worked. The son got the job, all thanks to his mother's commitment to gaining that specialized knowledge.
That's incredible. Okay, so we've got the desire, the clear vision, the faith, the ability to visualize our success, and now this focus on acquiring the right knowledge. What's next?
Well, Hill also understood that even with all the right ingredients, we can't just sit around waiting for things to happen. We need to take action.
That's where imagination and organized planning come in.
You got it. Hill called imagination the workshop of the mind, the place where we transform those desires into concrete plans.
I like that. So it's about taking those dreams and turning them into actionable steps.
Exactly. He tells this fun story about a salesman who buys this beat-up old kettle and some secret formula.
Okay, where's this going?
Well, the salesman takes this kettle and using a combination of imagination and a whole lot of hustle, he turns it into a wildly successful business.
What was the secret formula?
I think the real formula was his willingness to take action, to put in the work, and to believe in his vision.
Love that. And it really highlights the importance of having a solid plan. It's not enough to just dream big. We have to break those dreams down into manageable steps.
Absolutely. Remember the story about the preacher who needed $1 million to build his dream college?
He's the one who delivered that killer sermon, right?
That's the one. Instead of just wishing for the money, he poured his heart and soul into crafting this incredibly powerful and moving sermon about what he would do if he had $1 million.
And it worked.
It did. A wealthy member of his congregation was so moved by his vision, by his passion, that he donated the entire $1 million on the spot.
Talk about a persuasive sermon, but it just goes to show the power of combining a clear vision with a well-articulated plan.
Exactly. Okay, so now we've got the desire, the vision, the faith, the knowledge, the plan. But there's one more crucial element that Hill talks about: decision.
What does he mean by that?
He's talking about overcoming doubt and procrastination by making clear, firm decisions, and then, most importantly, acting on them decisively. He couldn't emphasize enough the importance of taking action.
He tells that wild story about the man he met just hours before his execution, right?
Yeah. And Hill was really struck by this man's sense of peace. And you know why he was so calm? Because he had made peace with his fate.
And that allowed him to face death with a sense of dignity and acceptance.
Precisely. The decision had been made, and in that decision, there was a sense of release.
So even though the decision was out of his control, the act of accepting it brought him a sense of peace.
Exactly. Hill believed that we often prolong our own suffering by delaying decisions, by remaining stuck in that state of indecision.
So it's not always about making the right decision, but rather about making a decision and moving forward from it.
Right. And then, of course, there's persistence, which is essential because we're all going to face setbacks. It's inevitable.
It's not about if we get knocked down, it's about how quickly we get back up.
Exactly. Hill actually uses the example of Wallace Simpson and King Edward.
Yeah.
Talk about a story of persistence, right?
Definitely a unique example. But it really highlights that unwavering determination to pursue what you want, even when the entire world seems to be telling you it's not possible.
Right. And then, of course, we have to talk about the mastermind.
This is one of my favorites. It's about recognizing that we don't have to achieve our dreams alone, right?
Absolutely. Hill is a huge believer in the power of collaboration, of surrounding yourself with a supportive network of like-minded people.
He talks about Henry Ford and his inner circle, right?
Yeah.
Edison, Firestone, Burbank. That's a pretty impressive mastermind group.
And that's the point. When you bring brilliant minds together, focused on a common goal, the possibilities are limitless.
So find your tribe, find your mentors, find those people who inspire you and challenge you to grow.
Exactly. Two heads are almost always better than one, and when those heads are aligned in purpose, magic can happen.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Think and Grow Rich, what's the biggest takeaway for our listeners?
I think the core message is that we all have this incredible potential within us. We all have the power to create extraordinary lives. There's no magic formula, but Hill gives us the tools, the mindset, and the belief system to unlock that potential.
He challenges us to step into our power, to embrace the principles of success, and to never stop believing in our ability to achieve our dreams.
And that's what it's all about, right?
Absolutely. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm feeling incredibly inspired to go out there and chase some dreams of my own.
Me too. Let's do it.
That's it for this deep dive. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, keep thinking and keep growing.